Great, so this is problem 31 from section 3.2, and we're asked to use Gauss-Jordan reduction, or what we talked about in class is just those different row operations in order to get it to reduced row echelon form. So the first thing that we're going to do here is change this into our matrix, our augmented matrix. So the first row will be 1, -1, 1, 0. The next one will be 1, 1. There's no z, so it's 0 and a 0. And the final row would be 1, 2, -1, and a 0. So like I mentioned in class, the first thing I'm going to aim for is getting some zeros here. And so I'm going to make sure I have plenty of space as I work. So maybe I'll change color here and leave the first row exactly as it is. So for the second row, I'm going to go ahead and say I want to let's do row 2, subtract off row 1. So this would give me 1 subtracting 1 is 0. 1 subtracting -1 is +2. 0 subtracting 1 is -1. 0 minus 0 is still 0. For the bottom row, I'm going to do the very similar thing, but here it's row 3 minus row 1. 2 as well get a 0. 3, -2, and a 0. Great, so now my next goal is to get a 0 right here where this 3 is. Notice the way that I've set it up, I'm going to want to avoid fractions. That's something that I just like to do if I can. And so I'm going to, for the next step, just rewrite the top row right here. If you'd like, you could rewrite the second row in a way that would make my last step easier, but I'm going to just leave it as it is. So I notice if I multiply the second row by 3 and multiply this row by 2, sort of think about scratch work, I would end up with a 0, 6, -3, 0, and this one would be a 6, -4, 0. So if I did that multiplication, then these numbers match, so I can get them to cancel without doing anything that's too gross. So what I'm going to do here is all in one step, actually. So you could do this in multiple steps. I'm going to try to do it at once here and say, well, I want to do, shall we say, 3 times the second row and subtract off 2 times the third row. So it's good to have a little bit of scratch work, which is what I have over on the right-hand side. So in this case, 3 times the second row minus 2 times the third row would be 0. 0, -3 minus -4 is +1, and 0. Great, so that bottom row is looking really good now. So in order to get reduced row echelon form, I want to get some zeros here and some zeros here. And what you might notice as we go along, so my next problem is I'm going to use the bottom row to change the ones about to try to get some zeros right there. So for the top one, I'm going to do row 1 minus the third. Give me 1, -1, 0, 0. I'm going to do row 2 plus the third because they already have different signs. 0, 2, 0, 0. And then leave the last row as it is. You might notice there's a lot of zeros here, and that's a bit of an insight. But I'm just going to keep on finishing out so we can make sense of the process. I will maybe think about doing the first row and adding half of the second row, which is going to be 1, 0, 0, 0. And then I'm just going to stick in the second row half of what it was to get that 2 down to a 1. So now we have reduced row echelon form, and our solution is the last column. So this tells you that x equaling 0, y equaling 0, and z equaling 0 is your only solution to this.